I'd like to use some images to accompany my sermon this morning, and just wanted to share with you that they come from this beautiful book that a Dutch friend of ours gave us, Annemieke Spolstra, and I so don't know how to speak Dutch so much that I don't even know the title of it. But I think it's He Was the One, or He Was the Only One. I was counting on Liz Sayer being here to answer this question. But this is the book, and the illustrations are beautiful, and it's the story of Jesus' life with these gorgeous illustrations. You'll see some of them up here, and I'm going to pass this off to give the choir something to do while I preach. They can look at the book. Okay, multitask back there. So it is an interesting and difficult scripture in certain ways, especially on this first day, this first Sunday of the new church program year, because we're welcoming you back from a summer of vacationing and encouraging those of you who haven't been around to reconnect with your church family. And Jesus is decidedly not in this scripture gathering people in, but trying to weed people out, especially in the Gospel of Luke, but also elsewhere. We get a real sense that Jesus is not a big fan of crowds. There's just no two ways about it. He often seems to be on just this side of running away from them, calling the disciples away to talk to them privately, going up to the mountain to pray by himself while people are looking for him, jumping on a boat to separate himself while there's a crowd on the shore, telling people he heals, "Don't tell everyone that I've done this, please." He never said, actually, "Where two or more are gathered, there I am," like he's often misquoted as saying. Jesus says very specifically, "Where two or three are gathered, there I am." It was the crowds that landed his mother and father in a stable rather than in a room at his birth. And it was the crowds he stood before who chanted, "Crucify him," at his death. No, crowds generate much too much groupthink and group emotion, tending towards lowest common denominators of human behavior, for Jesus to be much interested in them. He was working at a much subtler level to transform hearts. Jesus was never looking for his words and his actions to go viral through the masses. And as this scripture makes clear, he in fact works in the opposite direction, to weed out the crowd, to keep just a remnant for the journey ahead. At this point in the gospel that you heard Kathy read, Jesus is on the road to Jerusalem, and people are following him. And while he knows what's facing him there, and while he has warned the disciples about what is facing him in Jerusalem, the crowd that's following him has no idea. That, I imagine, is why he turns to them and says these words that come quite harsh. To go where I'm going, you might as well hate the people around you, hate your very life itself, because you're going to have to give it all up. Take up your cross, give all your possessions, and come on and follow me. I mean, can you imagine what the crowd was like? Oh, wait a minute, I think I forgot something back at home. I was just going to this next town anyway. I thought I would follow, but Jesus weeding out the crowd. And even though, honestly, we might be more with those who drift away back to the comfort of their homes and the regular routine of their lives, we also can't dismiss Jesus' challenge as being simply for the elite disciple, or the most hardcore of Christians. For he puts his finger on a core spiritual principle that equally applies to the 4th century desert dweller, to the 21st century suburban American. And that is that there is a higher order that holds sway beyond the superficial orders of this world. And to this higher order, we must be responsive. There is a higher call to us that comes within and at times beyond the immediate responsibilities of our lives. And this higher order can require the sacrifice of the superficial order at times and make our lives pretty uncomfortable. God, the good, the right, the truth, requires our allegiance and devotion at times at the expense of our comfort and security and well-being, and even at times at the expense of our families, our tribal loyalties, our country. And there are so many awe-inspiring examples of this that you know in the stories of people who risked their lives to harbor Jews from the Nazis, or those who made of their homes a stop on the Underground Railroad, or others who risked their livelihood to blow the whistle on corrupt government or corporate practices or abusive bosses. Examples of those who embrace the truth of themselves as gay or trans despite the fracturing of their families, or those risking life and limb to stand against environmental abuse. We all know these stories. And those are the dramatic examples that most of us are awed and moved by, but how many of us would take those roads? Would we follow such conviction all the way through to such sacrifice and consequence? But there are smaller moments too where we are asked to stand for truth, to respond with care, to hold out with integrity, to do what is right even though no one is looking, to challenge what is even a little bit wrong. And sometimes those smaller moments and the inconvenience of them can be daunting too. And I wonder if they contribute as much to the reign of God's higher order as the great moments. Jesus asks, "Will you take up your cross and follow me? Will you prioritize what is honest and true, good and right, in small or great ways, whatever the cost may be?" It takes intentional quiet and prayer, I believe, to even notice the moments sometime, to silence the voice of the crowd and recognize the whispers of God. It takes quiet and prayer. But we can build that muscle of responding to God's higher order in the smaller ways, so that when and if the large demand comes, the one that says, actually, drop your nets, drop all you're doing, come and follow me, then we might consider doing that too. Amen.